Hey guys, it's Sasha. The United States has just signed a new trade deal with the UK. According to Donald Trump, this was the first fair, open and reciprocal trade deal, something our past presidents never cared about. It's a shame that so many of the trade deals previous American presidents signed were so poorly put together. The most fascinating thing about this US-UK trade deal announcement is that it had almost no actual substance to it whatsoever.
And we started at 10% and we ended at 10%, and the market for America is better.
The same 10% tariff that Donald Trump announced over a month ago that nobody actually thought about still applies to the vast majority of UK exports to the United States after this trade deal. So despite all the fanfare, despite all of the bootlicking, very little has actually changed. In the whole of 2024, the UK exported $75 billion worth of goods to the United States. The United States imported a total of $3.3 trillion of goods from the entire world in 2024. So imports from the UK make up about 2.4% of the total. The UK also imported $72.5 billion worth of goods from the United States, which means that in terms of just the goods, the UK had a trade deficit of $2.5 billion with the US, which is a rounding error of a rounding error when it comes to the size of the US economy. The UK does import a lot of US services though, because we all pay for things like Google, Netflix, Amazon, and many other big American companies that provide services. So the United States actually has a 66% trade surplus with the UK when you include goods and services, but anyway, Keir Starmer celebrated the deal as a huge benefit to the UK, and apparently this will be great for the UK economy. It is an unprecedented kind of deal. According to a fact sheet produced by the UK Department for Business and Trade, the top 5 goods exported by the UK to the United States are cars, medicinal and pharmaceutical products, mechanical power generators, scientific instruments, and aircraft. So I put together a handy table over here which shows you how good the UK government is at negotiating, how great this deal is going to be for the UK economy. The first column is the tariff that was in place on the export of those goods to the United States before Trump became president in January 2025. And in the second column, you can see the new tariff, which is going to be an amazing deal for the UK economy, which will significantly expand trade. So cars used to have a 2.5% tariff. This was the most favored nation duty under WTO trading rules. And now that 2.5% tariff has been reduced to just 10% for the first 100,000 cars produced, and that it will then increase to 25% for any cars over the quota.
It will remove tariffs on British steel and aluminium, reducing them to zero.
Before this groundbreaking trade negotiation, the likes which we have never seen, steel and aluminium used to have a 0% tariff between the UK and the United States, and as Keir Starmer proudly announced yesterday, instead of this punitive 0% tariff, steel and aluminium will now benefit from not having any tariff applied at all. But steel and aluminium are not even in the top 5 exports from the UK to the United States. Going back to the original table, pharmaceuticals were exempt from tariffs under the WTO 0 for 0 trade agreement previously, but will now benefit from having a low 10% tariff rate applied instead. Mechanical power generators and scientific instruments would also mostly be under a 0% tariff, with occasional duties of up to around 2% being applicable, but those exports will now drop all the way down to just having a 10% tariff. Donald Trump said that Rolls-Royce engines will be exempt from tariffs specifically, but I went through the paperwork that was published by the White House afterwards and I couldn't find any references to engines or Rolls-Royce at all, so I'm not sure if they will actually be exempt or not. I'm presuming they will be, and it sounds like aircraft will now be subject to the full 10% tariff as well. Talking about aircraft, I actually just had a 1-hour session with my course members discussing airline stocks, because airline stocks are very sensitive to international trade, and last year airline stocks were the biggest winners in my portfolio. I have an hour session every week with my course members. If you want to join my investor playbook course, you can get a 10% discount by using the code MAYDAY at the checkout. This course teaches you all about how to become a better investor, how to do stock analysis, how to read the different financial tables, how to build valuation models, and a whole lot more. The 10% discount is available for the next week until midnight on Sunday, 18th of May. Go and get your discount now if you want to get this course. I don't do discounts very often. Go to my website, sashayanchin.com. The link is in the video description and in the pinned comment. Make sure you go and get it if you're interested. So, going back to the trade deal, the numbers are unequivocal. The new deal means that trade between the UK and the United States is in a significantly worse place than it was before this negotiation started for the UK because of the new tariffs. And at the announcement, Donald Trump made it very clear that the baseline 10% tariff is going to be the minimum that applies to all other countries as well. And this is significant. So even with all of these so-called trade deals, the unfortunate situation for the United States is that the isolationist policy of this new government of imposing tariffs will not be going away at all. The stock market and the US analysts on CNBC seem to not care whatsoever about this, finishing the day 0.6% up in the green yesterday, which is odd in my opinion because the stock market fell by 12% immediately after Donald Trump announced the tariffs on April 2nd, presumably because people thought that there is a massive fuck-off problem with having permanent tariffs on all imports to the US. And the entire reason for the stock market rebounding in the last few weeks is because of this anticipation that these new trade deals would come and that the tariffs would eventually be dropped. But now that we have seen that tariffs do not look like they are going away at all, it is kind of weird that the stock market is wildly celebrating, because according to one of the several hundred conflicting reasons for why the tariffs were implemented in the first place, the tariffs were never meant to be a permanent thing anyway, and they were meant to be just a bargaining chip. I'm not sure if it's that or if tariffs are actually going to make America incredibly wealthy. The two obviously don't line up because it's one or the other, but Donald Trump has basically just announced that tariffs are here to stay permanently. And he said that the baseline tariff on other countries may well be substantially higher.
The 10% baseline tariff remaining in place, is that a template for these future trade deals?
No.
You're going to keep it here?
No.
Is it going to stay in every case?
No, that's a low number. They made a good deal. Some will be much higher because they have massive trade surpluses, and in many cases they didn't treat us right.
So that means prices in the United States are going to have to start increasing, pushing inflation significantly if the same sort of policy that just got applied to the UK will be applied in other trade deals as well. The bosses of the Los Angeles and Seattle ports have already been giving interviews sounding the panic alarm about the fact that the volume of imports in their ports, especially from China and other Asian countries, has slowed down significantly. So trade deals like the one that was just agreed with the UK is not really going to solve the problem that the United States imports over $3 trillion of goods per year, and there is no simple, meaningful, practically applicable way of replacing that in any reasonable timescales by domestic production. And as it stands, the flow of those goods has fallen very sharply. Now, look at the other side of the US-UK trade deal, because the UK has not done very well out of it. But what about the US? Well, the UK has not really dropped any tariffs at all, pretty much, with one or two exceptions, because there weren't really any tariffs to drop in the first place. According to the White House, this trade deal will significantly expand US market access in the UK, creating a $5 billion opportunity for new exports for US farmers, ranchers, and producers. And here's the thing. Donald Trump is saying that this historic trade deal will create a $5 billion opportunity for US companies. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis says that US GDP is currently at about $30 trillion. So even if that $5 billion opportunity actually materializes to the full amount, it will generate a whopping 0.02% benefit to the US economy. 0.02% benefit. But out of the $5 billion, less than $1 billion is actually itemized, like they tell you where it's going to come from. This includes more than $700 million in ethanol exports and $250 million in other agricultural products like beef. And tariffs or no tariffs, US beef producers will really struggle to export beef to the UK because of the strict food safety standards. The tariffs are really a secondary issue here. The food safety standards prohibit practices like pumping growth hormones into cattle because people in the UK prefer not doing that. And not only do US producers have to adhere to these rules in order to sell to the UK, but they also then have to document and verify their adherence, which is the difficult and expensive bit. And I'm guessing most beef producers in the US are probably not going to waste their time and money doing this for this very small market. So the $250 million worth of beef exports have a big question mark next to them. The rest of the apparent benefits for US exporters are a load of completely meaningless waffle. It commits the countries to work together to enhance industrial and agricultural market access. It closes loopholes and increases US firms' competitiveness in the UK procurement market. It ensures streamlined customs procedures for US exports. I'm not sure if it's just ChatGPT that wrote it. It looks like a bunch of mumbo-jumbo word salad of popular business speak phrases that, according to this announcement, amount to over $4 billion worth of trade. So the net benefit to US companies from this deal is practically zero. Maybe a few ethanol producers might benefit, although the UK already imports around 13% of all US ethanol exports for a grand total of $535 million a year. So I guess dropping the import tariffs on US ethanol, the one change in there, may increase those particular exports while decimating the domestic UK ethanol production industry. But when you look at the bigger picture, like everything else, this trade deal, aside from not really having any meaningful substance at all, really showed us two things. First, the United States will proudly announce these trade deals that are much ado about nothing, because the purpose of these announcements is not to announce great benefits to the US economy. The purpose is to benefit Donald Trump's popularity and domestic politics. And second, the tariff policy is here to stay. It is weird that this is not a really big issue, and it is weird that nobody seems to be paying attention to this. Now that they have made this big announcement, with all the fanfare, right, with all of the publicity, it will be much harder for Donald Trump to undo this tariff policy. Previously, he had a way out. He could have gone and said, look, we're going to do these trade deals, and the result of the trade deals will be the undoing of the tariffs. We can go back to zero with the countries that want to play ball. The UK has apparently agreed to this new 10% baseline tariff. So what happens if Trump goes and does a deal with another country where the baseline is zero? Well, naturally, it would really piss off the UK and any other country that does their own trade deals that has had these large tariffs slapped on their exporters. So that's not really a viable position any longer. So this trade deal that was just announced essentially burns the bridge that Donald Trump had that allowed him theoretically to walk back on the tariff policy at some point. And it means that the impact on the US economy this year is going to be severe. There's going to be inflation, there's going to be other negative repercussions, but now there is no easy way to undo this impact without losing face and political chutzpah. Remember, if you want to join my course, do not miss out on the 10% discount. Use the code MAYDAY. Link in the description. Go and get it if you're interested. See you in the next live session. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.